People respond to problems and distress in many different ways. Some people try to take their mind off of it by distracting themselves and avoiding thinking about their distress or its sources. Others try to put things in perspective by reminding themselves that things could be worse. Some try to accept their problems and move on. Others try to find a silver lining by thinking of the positives in the situation. Some people try to think of possible solutions to their current problems or what they could do about problems in the future. Others replay events in their head over and over, trying to analyze what happened in order to understand what went wrong. You have been invited to participate in this study because you tend to respond to problems and distress with a type of thinking called rumination. So you're probably wondering, what is rumination? Rumination is repetitive thinking about your distress or problems. Your thoughts tend to go in circles, constantly moving but getting you nowhere, like a hamster running in a wheel. Asking the same questions over and over without finding answers. It is often difficult to stop once it starts, leaving you feeling trapped in your head. It usually starts as an attempt to understand or solve your distress or problems, but ultimately proves unproductive and often leaves you feeling more upset than you did when you started. Sometimes, even after you have stopped ruminating, the thoughts keep returning, intruding your mind, like uninvited guests who overstay their welcome and continue to crash your party. Rumination often occurs in the form of thoughts like, why am I so upset? How did this happen? Why do I always do this? How am I going to fix this? Why do I have problems other people don't have? Why do I always react this way? Why would he or she do that to me? Or what's wrong with that jerk? Now, you might be wondering, if rumination is distressing and unhelpful, then why do people do it? People usually ruminate because they have inaccurate beliefs about the function or process of rumination. Generally, people ruminate because they believe doing so will help them in some way. However, rumination rarely, if ever, actually leads to the desired outcome. I will briefly go through some of the common beliefs that lead people to ruminate and why they are inaccurate. Some people believe that rumination will lead to understanding and insight about their distress, its sources, or its consequences or meaning. However, ruminating about distress or problems generally brings up thoughts that accidentally end up fueling the distress and keeping it around, making it more intense and longer lasting. Thinking about all of the reasons you might be sad, anxious, ashamed, or angry means listing reasons for you to be sad, anxious, ashamed, or angry, which often extend beyond the initial reasons for your distress, leading you to think of new reasons to be upset. These types of thoughts are generally biased and focus on the negatives related to the distress. This type of thinking ultimately leaves you feeling worse than you did when you started ruminating. While often intended to help reduce distress, rumination actually does the opposite. It typically intensifies and prolongs our distress, leaving people feeling worse than when they started for longer periods of time than they otherwise would have. For example, when someone notices they are sad, if they start to think about why they might be sad, they essentially start to list reasons to be sad and think about things that make them sad, thereby intensifying their sadness. So in this, and in most cases, ruminating on sadness could turn mild, potentially momentary or passing sadness into more intense, potentially overwhelming, and longer-lasting sadness. Essentially, ruminating on distress fills your mind with thoughts related to the initial distressing emotion, such as sadness, which often expands beyond the initial sources of distress. The same can happen with other emotions too. For anxiety, we might have thoughts like, what if I say something stupid and mess up this interview? And then worry about all of the possible negative consequences. Or, will I be unemployed forever? I won't be able to pay my bills and have nowhere to live. Ultimately leading us to feel more anxious and hopeless. With anger, we may focus on all of the ways the other person has made us angry in the past, making us feel even angrier with them, such as, why would someone do that to me? How could someone be so mean? Or, he always does this to me. With shame or guilt, we may focus on everything we've done in the past that we regret, intensifying our distress. Like, I can't believe I said that. What's wrong with me? And why do I always do stupid things like that? Some people believe that thinking about problems, past failures, or feared future outcomes will help them think of solutions to their distress or problems and help them to avoid or respond better in similar situations in the future. However, rumination often leads to thinking about things that are not a part of the current situation. This may leave you thinking about problems more generally, which actually makes it more difficult to think of solutions to your current problems. Ultimately, rumination often leaves you feeling overwhelmed by and hopeless about solving your problems. We can see why rumination is understandable, but ultimately it is not helpful and is often harmful. So let's discuss what we can do to change this mental habit. Today you will learn how to begin to change the habit of rumination. I will teach some skills that you can use to reduce the frequency, intensity, and duration of your rumination. It's difficult to stop doing something just by deciding or wanting to stop. Instead, an easier way to stop a bad habit or type of thinking is to respond to the behavior with an incompatible one that prevents you from continuing to do the behavior you want to stop. For example, if you want to stop biting your nails, you might start chewing gum in situations where you usually bite your nails, because you can't bite your nails while you are chewing gum. One thing that you can't do while ruminating is mindfulness. Mindfulness is the intentional, accepting, and non-judging focus of one's attention on the present moment as it currently is. If you are focused on the present moment, you are not thinking about things that happened in the past or that might happen in the future. If you are filling your attention with what is going on now, in the present moment in the real world, then there is no room in your mind for thinking about why you are feeling a certain way, what it might mean, or what might happen as a result. While mindfulness can apply to a wide range of activities, really anything you can do can be done mindfully. Today we will teach you 2 specific mindfulness skills that can be used to stop or block rumination when it comes up. The first is mindful breath watching. You can use the mindfulness skill of observing your breath when you find yourself ruminating and you weren't doing anything before. For example, you can practice mindfulness when you are trying to fall asleep, riding the bus, showering, doing chores, etc. Take a moment to think of any other situations where you often find your mind wandering to rumination. When we use a mindfulness skill like breath watching, sooner or later, usually sooner, we find that our mind has a life of its own and that, regardless of our determination to keep our attention focused on the breath or any other object, it will wander away into various thoughts, often about the future or past. It is natural to think that one has failed at mindfulness when the mind wanders here, there, and everywhere. However, the tendency of the mind to wander is perfectly normal. Mind wandering is actually supposed to be a part of mindfulness. Each moment that the mind takes off gives us an opportunity to become aware of when we are slipping or have already slipped out of mindful focus and into uncontrolled thought. It allows us to be more aware of the thoughts, feelings, and body sensations that carry us away in those moments. These occasions also provide us with valuable opportunities to cultivate the skills of releasing ourselves from random, uncontrolled thinking and return to the more mindful way of focusing and experiencing our breath and its accompanying sensations. This is why the instructions for the mindfulness of breathing skill encourage us to congratulate ourselves when we notice our attention is no longer on the breath, when we catch our attention elsewhere. Whatever the content of the thought, emotion, or impulse that takes our attention away from the breath, the task is the same: to note what is on our mind in this moment and then to gently guide our attention back to our breathing, renewing our focus on breathing in and out, whichever is happening when we come back. If we find ourselves frustrated or judging our wandering mind, we should treat those reactions, the thoughts and emotions about our wandering mind, the same as any other distracting thought. We note them and gently refocus our attention on our breath. Consciously acknowledging the mind wandering reminds us that we've already returned our attention to the present moment, and can make it easier to let go of the tendency to judge ourselves harshly for not doing it right. Exercises like this often highlight how readily the mind is pulled away from the intended point of focus, the breath, by other thoughts. Again and again, you will notice the wandering of your attention. Take a moment to acknowledge where it has gone, rather than quickly trying to pull it back, and then gently return your attention to where you intended to focus, the breath. You cannot prevent the mind from wandering. That is what it does by nature. Rather, you can begin to take control of how long it wanders by noticing and redirecting your attention back to the breath when your mind wanders. Mindfulness provides us with both the means to shift mental gears when we are pulled into rumination, as well as a mental gear that is incompatible with rumination that we can switch into. Your breath is always with you. With this skill, you will learn that you can tune into your breath at any moment in the day, like an anchor, grounding you in the present moment, pulling you back out of your rumination. The goal of this skill is to observe the mind wandering during the practice and learn to reconnect with the bodily sensations of breathing. To attend to the breath, notice mind wandering, and to become familiar with the habits of the mind. To begin to use the breath as a vehicle to reconnect with the present moment awareness when the mind has wandered. The breath is a route to present moment awareness. At its core, this skill is about using the breath as an anchor to tie your attention to. While you focus on your breath, your job is to notice when your attention shifts back to rumination or any other thoughts, and then refocus your attention on your breath, coming back to your anchor in the present moment, the breath. Okay, now let's try this skill out. I'm going to ring this bell once to start and once to stop the skill's practice. Just follow along to the instructions. Sitting on a straight-backed chair or couch or on a cushion on the floor, allow your body to become still. The back is straight without being stiff. The posture is relaxed, awake, and dignified. The hands can rest gently on the knees or in the lap. The eyes are open, simply resting the gaze on whatever is in front of you, without thinking too much about what you're viewing, or you can close your eyes if you prefer. Settling into this moment, we begin watching the breath. Become aware of the fact that you're breathing. Become aware of the movement of the breath as it flows into and out of the body. Feel the breath as it comes into the body and as it leaves the body. Simply remain aware of the breath flowing in and flowing out, not manipulating the breathing in any way, simply being aware of it and noticing how it feels. When your mind becomes distracted, and it will become distracted, simply return to the breath. No commentary, no judgment. Don't get pulled away from the breath by thinking about your distracting thoughts or the fact that you became distracted. Allow yourself to be with this flow of breath, coming in and going out. Notice the feeling of the breath as the lungs fill with air as you breathe in and deflate as you breathe out, the chest expanding and collapsing. Perhaps feeling the breath in the abdomen rising as you breathe in and flattening and sinking as you breathe out. Allow your attention to gently ride on the sensation of each breath, not thinking about breathing without the need to comment, simply watching your breathing. Allow the breath to flow naturally, not needing to change it in any way, giving full attention to each breath. Observe the full cycle of each breath, locating the very beginning of the breath as it enters the nose or mouth, and following it as it fills the lungs and expands the chest and the abdomen, then comes to the gap where there is neither in-breath nor out-breath, before it turns around and makes its journey out of the body. Simply remain present for the cycle of each breath, being there, letting your attention gently float on the awareness of your breath. After a short time, you may notice that the mind wanders off to thoughts of the past, fantasies, memories, or regrets. Or it may move to anticipation of the future, planning, wishing, and judging. You may find yourself thinking about what you'll do after this exercise, what you have to do at work, other things that you have to do. As soon as you become aware that the attention has moved off of the breath, guide it back to the next breath with a gentle and firm awareness. There's no need to give yourself a hard time saying, "How did I become so distracted?" Simply come back to this breath. Watching the breath and the arising thoughts without judgment, simply observing. Bring your attention back to the breath without judgment, knowing that you can always use the awareness of your breath to refocus your attention to return to the present. Once again, bringing the attention to this breath in this moment. Breathing in with the in-breath, breathing out with the out-breath. Feeling the movement in your body. The breath anchoring the attention in this moment. When the mind wanders, bring your attention back to the breath, knowing that you can always use the awareness of your breath to refocus your attention, to return to the present. Whenever you notice that you have drifted from the present, when you have become distracted, preoccupied, or restless, the attention on the breath can be a powerful anchor to this moment and to this state of awake stillness. And now, for the time remaining, let go of all particular objects of attention, allowing yourself to simply be here, simply present. Breath moving, sensations in the body, sounds, thoughts, all of it coming and going, allowing all of it, and dropping into being, into stillness, present with it all, as it unfolds, complete, as you are, whole. The second mindfulness skill we are going to learn today is called One Mindful Activity, and we will practice it by eating a raisin one mindfully. However, you can one mindfully do any activity by applying the same kind of focused attention we will use while eating the raisin to whatever else you do. When you find yourself ruminating and you were previously doing something else, or you need to start doing something else, for example, driving, showering, eating, a task at work, etc., you can use the skill of one mindful activity to return to or begin the experiences of that activity in a mindful way, just like we will do today with the experience of eating a raisin. We can transform our experience by intentionally paying attention to it in particular ways. Again, mindfulness is not paying more attention, but rather paying attention differently and more fully, with whole mind and body, using the full resources of the body and its senses. First, take a raisin and hold it in the palm of your hand, or between your finger and thumb. Focusing on it, imagine that you've just dropped in from Mars and have never seen an object like this before in your life. Take time to really see it. Gaze at the raisin with care and full attention. Let your eyes explore every part of it, examining the highlights where the light shines, the darker hollows, the folds and ridges, and the asymmetries or unique features. If you find your attention elsewhere, just gently return it to the site of the raisin. Turn the raisin over between your fingers, exploring its texture, maybe with your eyes closed if that enhances your sense of touch. Holding the raisin beneath your nose, with each inhalation, drink in any smell, aroma, or fragrance that may arise, noticing as you do this anything interesting that may be happening in your mouth or stomach. Now slowly bring the raisin up to your lips, noticing how your hand and arm know exactly how and where to position it. Gently place the object in the mouth, and without chewing, notice how it gets into the mouth in the first place. Spend a few moments exploring the sensations of having it in your mouth, exploring it with your tongue. Again, if you notice your thoughts are about other things, just simply return your focus to the raisin. When you are ready, prepare to chew the raisin, noticing how and where it needs to be for chewing. Then, very consciously, take 1 or 2 bites into it and notice what happens in the aftermath, experiencing any new waves of taste that come from it as you continue chewing. Without swallowing yet, notice the bare sensations of taste and texture in the mouth and how these may change over time, moment by moment, as well as any changes in the object itself. When you feel ready to swallow the raisin, see if you can first detect the intention to swallow as it comes up, so that even this urge is experienced consciously before you actually swallow the raisin. Finally, see if you can feel what is left of the raisin moving down your throat into your stomach and sense how the body as a whole is feeling after completing this exercise in mindful eating. To use the skill of one mindful activity means bringing raisin mind to your current activity. In other words, focusing and maintaining your attention on one thing at a time, just like you did when eating the raisin today. You can use this skill with routine activities each day, with simple actions like cooking, driving to school or work, folding clothes, washing the dishes, or taking a shower, that might normally be done on autopilot with the mind wandering elsewhere, maybe ruminating. Because our 5 senses, touch, taste, sound, smell, and sight, are by their nature present-focused, attending to the sensations we feel during an activity, such as taking a shower, can be helpful to focus the attention on, and likely continuously refocus on, during one mindful activities. much like how the breath and its sensations can serve as an anchor for the breath-watching skill. Now that we've learned these two skills and when to make use of them, let's make a plan to practice them, to maximize effective use of these tools. The best predictor of behavior change is the frequency of practicing the skills. Rather than getting frustrated when you catch yourself ruminating, remind yourself that noticing that you are ruminating is a successful practice of noticing that your attention has drifted out of the present moment and into rumination, as well as an opportunity to practice one of the skills we just learned here today. To practice using mindfulness to take hold of and refocus your attention to the task at hand or the breath. Some helpful things you can do now to help with your skills practice throughout this week are to make a commitment to practice interrupting rumination and to use one of the mindful ways of responding to stop ruminating when you catch yourself. It can be easy to justify rumination when we're distressed, to fall back into old habits and convince ourselves it's the right thing to do based on some of the false beliefs we discussed earlier. So we need to take it off the table, so to speak, by making a commitment to not intentionally ruminate, no matter what, for the coming week. If you aren't sure that you want to stop ruminating, then try thinking of this week as an experiment, to see how things could or would be if you decided to stop ruminating, as well as an opportunity to practice and master the skills we just learned so you can make use of them in the future if you decide they would be helpful. It can also be helpful to identify red flags or warning signs of rumination now so that you can watch out for them to help you notice when you're ruminating. Some general rules of thumb for when you might be ruminating are: if you've been thinking about something for more than a couple of minutes and you are no closer to solving the problem or addressing the issue, then you are probably ruminating. If your thoughts are going in a loop, if you're thinking about the same things repeatedly, getting caught up in all of the details, then you are probably ruminating. If your emotions are intensifying the more you think about something, then you are probably ruminating. If your thoughts are filled with why or how questions, like why am I so upset, how did this happen, why do I always do this, or how am I going to cope with this, then you are probably ruminating. It can also be helpful to identify things that often lead to rumination. Since rumination is a habit for many of us, once we know what to look out for, we can start to predict when we might ruminate. Sometimes we can identify certain people, places, events, or emotions that start us down the thinking path of rumination. For example, seeing a place that reminds you of an ex-partner, getting a bill in the mail, preparing for an important meeting or test, making a mistake at work or school. Take a moment to think of any other situations you might be likely to ruminate about. We may also be able to identify certain times of day or specific activities during which we frequently find our minds wandering into rumination. For example, many people ruminate when they are trying to go to sleep at night, or when they are doing a routine or mundane activity that requires little thought, or that can be done on autopilot, like going to work or folding laundry. It can also be helpful to create a cue or signal to remind you to check in and see if you are currently ruminating, in case you're doing it at an unpredicted time or situation or without awareness. Some examples are: put some kind of reminder picture on the home screen or background of your cell phone so that you can remind yourself whenever you look at your phone. Set alarms on your phone, tie a piece of string to your finger, place sticky notes around your house or office, check in whenever you go to the bathroom, or whenever you eat or drink something, or whenever you notice a piece of jewelry you're wearing. Take a moment to think of a cue you could use to remind yourself to check if you're ruminating. Now you have 2 skills to use to block rumination: mindful breath watching and one mindful activity. Use your reminder cues and knowledge of rumination-related situations to help you increase your awareness of rumination and apply these skills when you notice it.